Hello, and welcome to Free Thought Forum. Real quickly, I gotta give the disclaimer that the opinions and ideas and views expressed on the show are not those of the broadcaster or the City of York or anything. It's just those of the people speaking them, which would be me and Jen. And speaking of Jen, we have a new...
Hi, everybody.
This is Jen.
It's my first day here, so go easy on me.
Yeah. If you want to call in, we'll have the phone number up on the screen in a few moments throughout the show. If you want to call in and share your opinions and your ideas about the things we're talking about. Today, we were going to talk about religion and women, or women and religion, however order we want to put that in, and just how that's all kind of gone down in history.
So, put down those remotes and stick with us. It's going to be a really great show, and this is an important thing for all of us to really think about. And we'll probably be able to go into what would things be like if there wasn't religion, and what kind of gender roles would we have, or would we have any at all? So, do you mind if I share my story first on how I became a free thinker?
Sure.
All right. Well, I was born to a household that was Catholic, so I grew up pretty confused my whole life because I didn't want to be involved in what they said I was supposed to be. I'm supposed to be a cook. I'm supposed to be a homemaker. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be important. And to me at a young age, important was having a good job and, being out in the world and seeing things and doing things. So I was really confused. It led to a lot of identity issues that I had. I had a lot of confidence issues. And I just grew up with a lot of problems because I couldn't figure out which way I was supposed to go. I wanted to try to fit in with my family. I didn't want to leave them and then feel like I had nothing. So I was really afraid for the longest time. Finally, I had to face realities at some point or another, and that wasn't easy either. And I realized, I can't really take in everything that religion is telling me. I think I need to back off and see what else there is out there. And that's when I found freethinkers, atheists, secular humanists, agnostics, things like that to look into. And slowly but surely, I'm gaining my confidence back, my identity, and I'm getting things rolling again. But women in religion is a very big topic for me because I wonder out there how many other people maybe struggle with that, or how do they reconcile? Mm-hmm. How do they reconcile what they read in the Bible and then what they see going on in the world around them?
So you would say, for your personal situation, the cultural mold that was being presented to you, that was kind of being laid in front of you and said, this is what you got to be someday. This is what it is to be a woman or a female and a girl and then a woman and all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was all kind of, made up by the religious influences.
Yes, it was. And, you're supposed to have children and, get married, have children. And what are you thinking if you don't want to do that? So, I kind of rushed into a marriage at one point because I thought, well, my goodness, what else am I going to be if I don't do this?
Yeah.
Definitely not a very strong thing to do, not really presenting myself as a strong person back then, but I was very confused.
Yeah.
And so, I'd like to try to clear up some confusion for other people and, maybe help them out if that's what it takes.
Yeah, well, it's hard for anybody to break out of, even, there's the family cultural pressures, and then you go to school. I don't know did you go to a Catholic school or did you just go to public school?
No, I was lucky. I went to public school.
Yeah. Well, even there, though, we have the pressures on us about what it is to be, for boys to be macho and not to be girly and, don't cry and all that kind of stuff. And then for girls to want to be soft and caring and overly emotional and all that. And then once you get into high school, then it's even more peer pressure, not even from necessarily your authority figures, but just your peers who have all bought into all of that
Yep.
then
Yes.
they reinforce it all, and you'll be ostracized if you don't meet the expectations of your peers. And then you move into the job, outside of high school. Maybe you go to college. Some people kind of go crazy once they go to college, though, and they break out, because then they see the world's a little bigger than...
Yeah. Sometimes in college, you kind of forget yourself, and you kind of, really, I don't need to do all this stuff. I don't need to think about it right now.
Yeah, now that mom and dad aren't so close.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden, you start realizing that you have to conform again to what society is telling you.
And then also that you do, a lot of people go through the teenage years and then early 20s, where you kind of, you're more wild. And then at some point you realize, hopefully most people realize, I have to form some sort of structure to live my life by.
Right, and it's part of the growing up process too, and it's not easy for any of us.
No, it's not. And it makes it a lot easier to have some outside authority tell you what to do rather than to figure it out for yourself. And that, I guess, would be the difference that we're talking about here, is religion is telling you, it's doing all the hard work for you.
Right.
It's making your life a lot easier by saying, well, you do this and you do that. And if you don't do those things, then something's wrong with you. And something's not just wrong, but so wrong with you that you deserve eternal, ultimate suffering forever.
Exactly.
That's how wrong you will be.
Here's your role. Yeah. Just be happy with it, and we'll all get along.
Yeah.
So.
But, humans aren't that simple.
No, and and then society changed. We went through this women's movement where women said, hey, wait a second, I want to be equal, I want to vote, I want to do this, I want to do that, So society went through this whole change that that I'm sure the churches weren't too fond of.
Yeah, they probably weren't.
And but now you can see that a lot of the churches, we have women ministers and women doing this and women doing that, and that's great and that's wonderful. But is that a change? Is that a change from a deity, or is that a change because society said, we have more options now?
Yeah.
Women have options, men have options.
I think my opinion of that would be that society, we got to a point into the 19th century where churches were being more informed by society around them rather than it being the other way. Not that it's totally reversed. It's certainly not, but we got to a point. There was the Second World War, and most of the men were gone, and the women had to work. The country would have just came to a stop if we had no workforce. So the previous, mold that was given to us had to be broken just out of necessity and practicality. Right. Religion was impractical. Its expectations of us was not practical. We would not have survived as a society. So we had to break and make accommodations to that.
Right, and then society saw, women saw, hey, I can do this.
Exactly.
I can work. I can, do everything else that they're telling me I couldn't do, and I just did it.
Yeah.
So now we have society saying, wait a second, now I want to keep going with this. I want to keep doing this. I like this.
Did you ever do you watch the show Madman?
Madman, no.
Okay.
I hadn't seen that.
It's set in the first season, I think, begins in the end of the 50s, and each season, is a few years later than the next. So, this season, I think they're in the mid-60s, I think. Or no, I think they were going right into 69, I think. 71? Go ahead and say it.
66.
66, okay. All right. Yeah, so it takes place in an advertising agency on Madison Avenue. That's why it's called Madman. And there are some women. There's one main female character named Peggy, and she wants to write advertising, but it's a man's world, and it's Madison Avenue in New York City, and it's just not, really. There's not much opportunity for that to happen. But so throughout the show, kind of her plot arc, her story arc is sort of seeing the women's movement. She sort of personifies that progress, trying to buck against the expectations of her placed on her by her family, her mother, which I think that's a Catholic family as well. Yeah. And then all of the men around her. And luckily for her, her boss is a slightly progressive guy, and he gives her opportunities that she normally would never have gotten. Am I right? I mean, he's kind of this. He thinks for himself. I would say, he does not conform. He just does what he wants to do. I guess. I don't know. I'm on a wild tangent with all that. But anyway, the point was that you saw in the 60s, as a result of, this time period from World War II on, women got a taste of being important, like you said, being the builders of a culture, being the important people, and why stop? It feels good to accomplish things, and it feels good to be in control. Yeah,
and a lot of women, as well as men, some men would rather stay in the home and say, I really like this. This is the kind of thing I like to do. And some women say, well, I don't want to be here. I want to be out there and doing things. And this is the things I want to do. I mean, they're a perfect match, because then they could each take on the roles. But then there's a lot of guys out there that take on these caretaker roles. And a lot of people are like, really? You stay home with the kids? Do you trust your husband? I mean, to do stuff like that. I mean, and when you think about the movie Daddy Daycare, everyone's like, you would keep your kids with these guys? Well, what's wrong with them? Why can't they take care of your kids? They can do it, And, of course, the movie portrayed that they can, and they did,
But, religious people would say, well, that's just the Hollywood agenda, liberal agenda, trying to ruin our civilization.
And change and...
Yeah.
I mean...
But it happens anyway, there's all these things, whether there's movies made about it or TV shows made about it or not, it's happening. It's going to happen. It has to happen. Because life isn't just so straightforward and simple that everyone can pick the same path and go through that.
Exactly.
So it's hard. But then for people to break out, I'm 30... How old am I? 32?
That's pretty bad.
I don't know. I don't really keep track.
Right after age 30, some people 35, you kind of forget that you have a birthday. You try to forget anyway.
Yeah.
So
I haven't had a lot of the pressures on, but it's pretty much anybody born from the 50s on has had less and less and less and less and less, of those pressures, and things have been opening up more and more, and the churches have been losing their grip more and more every year. And then they try and accommodate for society, with the making of women priests and stuff, because they know if they don't, they're going to get looked at as old-fashioned. Look at the Mormon church keep having to change and be more accommodating to normal society.
Well, and that's very important to them, because they want to keep up their numbers and keep their parishioners happy. Mm-hmm. And if half of your parishioners are women, well, you're going to need something to carry them in, But yet, if you go back to the source of how all these religions were made, which they all kind of center around the Bible Bible tells women you got to be silent. You shouldn't be out there. Your job is to be in the home. You're supposed to submit. And I just still don't know how people get around this. How do they read the Bible and say, oh, well, but that's not today. That's not.
Yeah.
But it was one day. Maybe it was in the past, but does the Bible never change? So how do we work ourselves around that? How do we,
By conveniently, selecting which parts to ignore and which parts not to ignore.
Well, that's what a friend of mine said. A friend of mine is Christian, and she says, you have to remember the churches don't do that anymore. The churches have places for women now, so there's not a problem. But something has got to be done about those Muslims, she said. I was like, all righty then,
Something's got to be done. Yeah, and I think the Bible says what it has to be done, actually. I think the Bible takes care of that for them.
So, what does it say?
It's probably something bad.
Let's not tell you. Yeah. Keep that to ourselves, or read the Bible, But again, we can visually see the oppression that goes on in some of these countries. You know what I mean? And we can relate it to the religion and say, wow, I'm so glad I'm in America.
Oh yeah, I think it's is it Iran? There's an Arab country that just still does not allow women to drive. I just saw a thing about this. I think it is.
Afghanistan? I know there's a woman there. I can't remember her name.
Is it Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Yeah, they still can't.
Like, it's so hard to imagine living in a culture, like living somewhere and being around people that are just like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. That's like, what? Like, how could you? That's just so baffling to me. I can't even understand it. And then when you get down to the reasoning, it's like, well, why? Why can't are your women? Is there some kind of handicap that over here there's something in the water, like they can't see as well or something? No, because Muhammad on the flying horse, and that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why they
sense.
Can't drive, right?
That makes sense. Now we got it. Now we got it. All righty. Yeah.
And if you criticize that, like, you might get killed. Like, that's.
Well, yeah, I definitely wouldn't go over there and start criticizing their religion. That's not a good idea.
No.
They can come over here and criticize ours, and that's okay, and that's great, and that's what I love about America, that you can do that, But I don't know. But I mean, here in America too, how do we? I don't know. Like, is there still a lot of baffling things that go on?
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't just refer to women. So let's get the guys involved in this and say, when one person is discriminated against, somewhere along the line, someone else is going to get discriminated against too.
Mm.
So, men get discriminated against just as much as women because of these gender inequalities.
Well, yeah, because it creating those rules. I mean, it's just like a wall. Like, it affects people on both sides of it. Like if you build a fence, it affects both neighbors.
Right.
So. And then it becomes a problem, like you said about the fathers who stay at home, the stay-at-home dads or whatever.
Yeah, and I think we saw this in the court systems where it was very rare for a father to gain custody of children in a divorce because, well, we all know that women just do it better, right? Well, no. Yeah,
it still is like that in most places.
There still is a lot of inequality out there. Because people still feel that the gender role is women take care of the kids and men work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's fair to a lot of fathers out there that want to be with their kids and want to be a part of their kids' life. And they don't want to put all those hours in behind a desk or wherever they're working. They want to put hours in at home, with their family. I think that's just being unfair to them. And that's why we really need to look at some of these gender roles and say, hey, is this a good idea? Is this a society that we want? I mean, Well,
then, see, me and my wife talk about these things, and we were like, because I think it's obvious that I'm pretty open about these and about discussing these things. And I don't necessarily I don't like adopting rules without good reason or adopting any sort of idea without a good reason for it. But then there's things like some of the stuff with the gender roles, the traditional gender roles that we have, where like the guy has to be masculine or assertive, and the female should be more submissive to the two males, things like that. When you get into other aspects of our lives, it's almost like we are biologically kind of like we will like that, like. It's kind of strange how some of that works out, but at the same time, it's like, well, but we're not just animals, like for animals, that stuff is extremely important because they can't reason and think about like, a male lion sees a female lion, he doesn't think about her character.
But we're assuming they're guided by instinct and,
And we still have some of those instincts, and we still have some of that stuff left over, and we do appreciate certain things. I don't know. But it's hard, like you have to, and this is where, it's important for free thought to for someone to pursue these ideas on their own without being controlled or coerced one way or the other, but to think about but how far do you go with that? Obviously it shouldn't be to the point where the male is so assertive that he is abusive. Obviously that doesn't respect the other person's rights as a human being or as just a sentient thing, just to have a personality. But how far back do you scale it back? Or maybe it turns into just maybe not amount of traditional masculinity roles or femininity roles, maybe not amount, but when, when do you be like this? When do you when do you assert your masculinity or your femininity or whatever, and that kind of stuff is not easy to figure out, and people just are going to make mistakes because there's no...
Right. I mean, it's, I think we've been so, even us, many of us, we've been so brainwashed within religion and gender roles that it is hard to really walk outside of the box and say, well, what if we allowed the guys, the little boys that want to play with women's toys, what we consider girls' toys, what if we let them? People in this society would say, oh my gosh, no, you don't do that. The child might be homosexual or something like that, or oh my gosh, they might grow up to want to be a homemaker or something. That's just not right. We can't do that, And then girls, I think though girls are more, as little girls, I would say as a little girl, you actually have more freedom than a little boy, I would say. Well, yeah. Well, in a way, yeah, because you can play kickball and softball and you can wear like boys' clothes and no one really thinks anything of it. No one's really... Yeah. It's not really a bad thing. No one's really like...
Like an 8-year-old girl wearing pants isn't a shocker, but an 8-year-old boy wearing a dress would be like, whoa. What?
Well, yeah, an 8-year-old boy walking around with a baby doll would be like, wow, what is that kid doing?
Yeah.
But an 8-year-old girl walking around with a baseball and a baseball bat, hey, go for it, girl, all right, so...
But he can have a G.I. Joe. He can't have a baby doll, but he can have a G.I. Joe. Like,
right.
What's the...
Right, and I don't know, to parents out there, I don't know if you saw your daughter wanted to play with G.I. Joe. Is that bad? Is that good? I don't know how they feel about that right now.
It seems like, there is a big... it seems like most people now, even whether we're talking about religious people or not, like, there's still like a women's empowerment kind of a thing. I think we all know that it's important to build confidence in our younger girls when they're children, by encouraging them to play sports and things like that, and all the good things that come out of that. Because we all know what that does for people. It helps build your confidence and your decision making, all kinds of things. Helps you be a team player and know when to be a team player and when to be an individual and all these things like that. But it's like you were saying, like there isn't kind of an equivalent going the other way for boys. There isn't really.
No, there's,
like
they're not encouraged to, seek out their more compassionate side, show their feelings more. And we should actually be raising our girls and boys just the same. There's, if your little boy or little girl gets a cut, your first reaction is, oh, let me help you. Let me take care of that for you. Why should you say to a boy, take it like a man, come on, it's just a cut. Or, and then say to your little girl, oh, you poor thing, we're going to get this taken care of. Don't cry. You're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
We need to treat them the same.
Yeah.
And, that might be the start in where these gender roles start meshing together.
Yeah.
And,
And the other thing is examples, like, I think is important, is examples. Like girls are always going to probably relate a little more with their mother or with whatever females are around them the most.
Yeah, well, that all depends on if you're Freud or not.
Freud and Jung had that whole, what did they call that?
That was...
there was the Oedipal, and then there was the Electra for the females, was the Electra thing, where they competed with the mother for the attention of the father after a certain age. That whole thing. I spent like a whole evening reading about all this stuff like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Just out of coincidence. That's kind of strange. But yeah, there was parts that didn't really make any sense, and it was like, that's just ridiculous.
Well, okay, so girls, they do relate more to their moms, I would say. They have a common
I think there's
bond.
a thing for all people. Just because we're so social, we are always trying to relate to everything. That gets into like why we anthropomorphize everything. We think that the weather, there's a God behind it. We think there's something like us to relate to in all these things. but we're always trying to relate to everything in order to understand it better, because it's easier if you can put yourself in those shoes. Now, that doesn't make much sense when you're talking about a tree,
Right.
but
exactly.
people do it anyway. But yeah, so I think, and then the easier that it is for you to see yourself as the thing that you're trying to relate to, the more you'll take on their things, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm just
the closer you
going off the
feel.
top. I don't have a degree in this or anything.
Yeah, neither do I. So,
Yeah. I'm just free thought. I'm free thinking right now, on the spot.
That's cool. That's good. And that's, that's probably what we should be doing the most of, eh? Just, people should think for themselves. I mean, that's what you got to do. Just think for yourselves. Teach your kids, think for yourself. Don't let somebody else tell you who you can and can't be. You have to figure that out on your own.
I see a lot of people, now I can see people calling in and saying, well, you can't let your kids, if you let your kids just decide who they're going to be be eating ice cream for dinner every day and bringing home every cat they find and blah, all this stuff. Well, I mean, that's not, I don't think
that's not what I'm saying.
But,
I mean, you teach your kids how to eat properly.
Yeah.
And then you hope that when your role is done, when you're no longer, when they're their own person, so to speak, they're an adult, they're out there in the world, that hopefully they're going to take that nutritional lesson with them and carry it through the rest of their life, I mean, and that's true for almost any issue, whether it's a social one and even, a sexual one with teenagers in school and stuff like that. I mean, you're hoping the lessons that you teach them or the things that you teach them will carry on through. But they also have to be their own person. They also have to be able to think for themselves. And, I mean, you have to teach them to go and look things up for themselves. Go find out. You want to know the answer to this question? We have this plethora of information on the internet. Find out. What did you see? What did you know?
Yeah.
Don't trust just my opinion on it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And even if you don't tell kids that kind of a thing, like they're gonna see by example how you make decisions and how you react and how you manage your emotions and all those kinds of things. And like they're gonna pick up a lot of that stuff just by example anyway. But so you have to worry about that kind of a thing, like, they may fear you just because of that. Like if they're thinking for themselves as far as gender roles or whatever, they may hide that from you just because they think that you'll freak out, because they've seen you freak out over other things or something.
Right, exactly.
So then you have this distance in your relationship that no one, whether the child or the parent, would be happy to find out that there's a lack of intimacy where there should not be a lack of intimacy.
Well, and here again, I mean, I don't want to keep, religion. And when my husband was really deep into religion, he was one of those fundamentalists, which when I, as a Catholic, I was like, wow, this is really gone wild now.
Was he Catholic or?
No, he was a fundamentalist, apologetic. I mean, he was knee deep
warrior,
in it.
Yeah.
He was, and I am coming from a Catholic background. We went to church, but you never paid attention. I mean, it was really too boring. So you just kind of picked up on all the fire and brimstone stuff. And so anyway, when I met him, his poor kids, you could see he wanted to have a good, intimate relationship with his kids, but the religion actually put a firewall there. And once he embraced atheism, I see a whole new world with these boys opening up to them, that they're able to come to their dad and say, I was thinking about this and I don't know what to do. And now they can actually talk to him. They can actually, they can trust that when they go to him, they're not going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And it created a really open communication between him and his sons where they don't feel like they really have to. I mean, I'm sure they still do things that we don't know about. I mean, that's being a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say, wow, this is great. They tell us everything. Yeah, right. No, I don't think so. But there's more open communication. And it's great to see because, now you can keep your kids in check a little bit more. And this is part of teaching them.
And then, And then overall, like when you kind of step out of that situation, you see that one's religion, say we're talking about three individuals, the religious beliefs of either of them doesn't really matter. In the end, that isn't what ends up controlling the situation, or that isn't the thing that ends up unifying them. It's thinking and treating each other kindly, or trying to understand each other and being compassionate, that ends up being the thing that keeps them together.
I agree with that, yeah.
That's interesting.
And that's a good point to make, you know.
What a complete failure his sort of idea was, that being strict about religion and really hardcore about religion would be ideal.
But, you know, a lot of people inside of religion, too, I mean, they're just trying to follow the teachings that are laid out in the Bible. And you can't do this, you can't do this. I mean, this is very strict stuff, you know, and you have to be, there's so many things you really can't do. So when you see your child doing it, you know, that's it. You got to chop that down and get rid of it, you know.
Well, did you see in the news a couple days ago, this pastor in North Carolina, maybe, he said that if you see your son, dads, if you see your son with a limp wrist or acting girly, you gotta walk up and slap him upside the head or grab him by the wrist. Yeah, slap him or punch his shoulder. There was a bunch of things. And then, like, he had to walk it back a couple of days later because he got in all this trouble because it was like,
I could imagine.
It was too extreme. And he was stupid enough to say it on recording, where it got tossed around the internet everywhere and everyone criticized him for it. But then he did kind of double down, like, you know, like, I mean, his point was, we live in a society where we're too tolerant of everything. And when we're tolerant of our children making their own decisions for things like that, we are then unable to control them and make them be who we want them to be.
Yeah, and you know, of course, my question is, well, who are we to tell them who they should be in the end?
Yeah,
you know,
because you wouldn't do that to an adult.
No,
you know, you wouldn't do that to like a 30-year-old. If you did, you'd be prepared for a conflict. You know,
exactly.
Like, but an 8-year-old isn't gonna.
And, you know,
some
mistakes, you know, you're going to have to let your girls and your boys out there, and some mistakes they're going to make, and they're going to have to make those mistakes in order to learn.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and that's just part of life. I mean, we don't like it sometimes, but that's reality.
Yeah.
You know, but what I would like to see, I mean, you know, what I'm interested, I guess, in knowing and seeing in society is how I still see a lot of young girls in religion, and how do they... How are they doing? How are they, you know, I mean, they still must be acting like teenagers or young women or this or that. How do they take the stuff that they see in the Bible and say, well, that doesn't apply to me? You know, I mean, I just, you know.
It's the cognitive dissonance.
I mean, we still live in a misogynistic society in many ways. We still have, you know, issues that we need to pan out, to work out. Feminists are still out there being active, you know, because there's still a lot of inequality. So what do we?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's weird, and it's even weirder when you see women like supporting causes that are against their best interests, like the Republic of Moral Women thing, and actual women Republicans being like, yeah, I'm all for it, yeah. Why would I want rights? Why would we shouldn't even be allowed to vote. Let's go all the way, you know? Like, I don't understand that. Like, I can't understand it. But it's like, how do they do that, you know? Why would you vote against your best interest? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand why you would want to vote to take your rights away. Or take anybody's right away. Maybe you don't have to believe. You don't have to do what's being said, but how are you able to make that choice for somebody else?
Yeah, there's that too, yeah.
You know, and then, well, I just don't understand how these women, you know, how do they, I don't know how they support that. Or you know, which woman was it in politics? I can't remember which one. She basically said she was a person of God, a person of faith, I should say person of faith. I can't remember her name. she's a person of faith, and, well, as a person of faith, then you submit to your husband, you're subservient to him. So if we elect you, who's really in office?
I see.
Do you remember her?
No, I don't know.
remember her name.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Michelle Bachman?
Oh, it was Michelle
Was it
Bachman?
Bachman? Yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
I mean,
So somebody
who's-
was asking her this question. Like,
Well, I don't think someone was asking her this question. Yeah.
she made the statement that
that
her husband is,
she's subservient to her husband. So if you elect her, we're really electing her.
Well, she didn't say that. I mean, she can't say that, but she did.
I
She did
see.
allude to the fact she was a person of faith, and she listened to her husband. And so then, well, I guess we need to know what his political issues are, because obviously, if she listens to him and he has the final say, then we need to know what he's going to say, not her. We don't need to hear from her anymore.
Yeah.
She's just the face now.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that all make sense in her mind? That she's a politician controlling the legislature of
And she's, but she's dictated by somebody else. And let's face it, we all made fun of Clinton for that. We all said, well, it was really Hillary that was the president, and this, that, the other thing. Well, who knows? Who cares?
Yeah. Well, and then it's even stranger because her husband's like really, really effeminate. So it's like, well, what's going on in that house? Like, which is the guy? I guess like, which everyone. That's just joking. Not in that kind of is contradictive of what I was saying earlier, but.
Just being sarcastic.
Yeah. But.
There you go. But I don't know. So, that is something when we see these legislators, we need to know. I mean, so isn't it a fair question to say, well, what's your religious affiliation? Because maybe this is something we should know so that we know if we elect you, who's going to be in office. Or, I mean, what is there, and with that religious affiliation, how much are they into it? How much are they going for it? We need to know this stuff because, ultimately, their beliefs are going to affect our lives.
Right.
And, and that brings up, their beliefs affecting our lives brings up a lot of women's issues. And on the forefront, abortion. And the newest member that, that has come up is the personhood bill. And now this has to be an example of the churches saying, you know what, wait a second, we're really kind of gotten out of control here, and we need to come back. We need to
get their control back.
Yeah, we need to get our control back, because the personhood is just, how do you even think of something like that?
Those, like the Arizona bill and the other one, I think it's Tennessee, have very similar ones that end up making it so that you're legally pregnant 2 weeks before you're actually pregnant.
Arizona.
And Tennessee, though, too. Because I remember, well, there was another state, and then like a week later, I heard about it being in Arizona as well. So there's at least 2 states where you're legally pregnant before you're actually pregnant. Which, like, now, you have to think about how does somebody, what line of thinking does somebody go through to come to such an absurd conclusion? Like, absolutely absurd. That doesn't make any logical sense. And why would anybody think that out and come to that conclusion to say, this is what law we should pass, this is how we should handle things?
It was based on the last menstrual cycle.
But still, you can't be pregnant before you're pregnant. You either are pregnant or you are not pregnant, and you can't be pregnant before you, like, when you're not pregnant. It's against logic. It's against reality.
And I see what you're saying. It's definitely against logic and reality, but when you, in the medical sense, I should say, in the medical sense, your pregnancy is based on when your last menstrual cycle was. So you always are pregnant 2 weeks before, based on the doctor's 40-week thing. It's
What?
It's weird. It's just weird. But
They can do it precisely as the baby gets older. That is what they do, but the legislation didn't take that into account.
yeah.
Well, and it should. You can't make legislation about pregnancy without taking all of it into account.
That's true.
That's kind of the bottom line. Is like you see where their motivations are and what their influences are for their reasoning. It wasn't medical science. It wasn't biology. It wasn't anything relevant to the issue. It was Jesus says this, That's what guided their thought process. And when you're talking about, like, should we care about, their religion?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes down, when they're going to be passing crazy things like this, then yeah. But a part of me wants to say that, well, everyone, wouldn't everything be better if we had no idea what religion our leaders were, and that was completely private, and you couldn't even find out, like, even if you wanted to, and it was illegal for them to say what they were, like.
You mean, and they just followed the Constitution?
Yeah, or if it was just totally secular.
Yeah, well, that would be wonderful.
I think, do we have a call? It doesn't say we do.
Okay, then I guess you do.
It doesn't ring? There's no.
There's a light.
Oh, I don't see any lights.
I'm not going to see that. Call back if you just called, please.
We'd love to hear from you.
I'll pay more attention. So, yeah.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, it'd be great if we could just follow, I hear a lot of people saying, we need to go back to the way this country was made. It was such a Christian nation. No, 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 no. It was not founded on Christianity. Adam said that. I can go through a whole list of former presidents and signers that they did not find this it was not founded on a Christian nation. It was more secularly guided when you read the Constitution.
Well, they wanted freedom.
Right.
That was the biggest issue, would have been freedom.
And so we have in the Constitution to keep church and state separate. So in that aspect, you're right. We should not know if we don't know their religious affiliation and they keep their church and state separate, then
Everything would just work out.
It would be a lot easier we wouldn't have these
it would end up
religious
working
wars.
out in their favor as well, like that. And that's the hardest thing about a lot of this stuff is, like, they don't get that some of this, a lot of secularizing a lot of things, a lot of religious people are so afraid of it because, well, I'm not even really sure why, but I don't think they understand that it would end up benefiting them greater than they understand it would. By creating a level playing ground for all religions, you allow all religions to proliferate. That's not what's going on in Iran. You can't even be Christian. In Egypt, you're going to have a very hard time just making it through the day.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they don't have the religious freedom. They are not as secular as us. That is the biggest difference between us and them is.
And I have to wonder if these lawmakers that are infringing on our rights, like abortion and personhood and blah, 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 are they seeing what's going on in other countries and how horrible it is? To be a Christian, you're a Christian in this country and you're allowed to be. What would happen if you went to another country? Do they see do they see the consequences of making it one religion and having everybody conform to that? Do they see the consequences involved?
I think another problem with that there is that when they do go to those countries, the few legislators and politicians that do go over to those countries, they go there on business. And they are shielded from the reality. They're there as businessmen first, and religious people second or third or fourth, maybe. And money is more important.
Yeah.
And in the end, that's really what their whole their religious politician persona here is all about. They want an easy career where they only work 180 days a year, and all because they just get in front of a camera and talk about Jesus a couple times and say, I'll vote, vote for me and I'll pass whatever crazy legislation you write for me to send on through.
I'll introduce it.
Yeah.
Here we go. And, well, and another thing is they say, well, they're wrong and I'm right. Their beliefs are wrong, but mine are right. So therefore, if mine's the right one, then then this is what we should be doing, of course.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of mentality. I mean, I've heard it growing up many times. My mom kept wanting to validate her religious beliefs. So she would find something and say, you see, look at this. This means that Catholic is the true religion. This is what it is, you see? And it was all this validation. And I'm like, well, Mom, no, that really doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not telling me that any faith or anything is the true one or the one or whatever. You're not making your point. So, I mean, aside from breaking my mom's heart in that way, that is still going on. People are trying to validate their own beliefs, and that's okay. I mean, that's what we do.
I think,
but
we hope for certain different things, and then we believe what we want to believe to kind of keep us going towards that, whatever it is our hopes are and our values and stuff. And then if you believe in, if the things you want to believe in are things that require faith, you're constantly trying to convince yourself that you're not deluding yourself, that you have good reason for believing those things. But in the end, people are going to believe whatever they want to believe, which kind of gets a little frustrating because it's almost like there's nothing you can say to them. It doesn't matter what you say. They're going to believe what they want to believe. Evidence isn't relevant. Facts don't matter. There's nothing that'll do it.
And that is very true. You know, I presented this question to some of my friends, and I said, so what do you think about women and religion and the oppression and this? And, well, little did I know it was going to spark a debate. And, of course, my one friend who, said a lot of what I've been listening to and a lot of the stuff I listen to, basically, keep the church and the state separate. Don't bring your beliefs in on my rights. And she was trying to present this issue, and the other one was trying to present, but life, life is God's gift. A baby is God's gift, and how could you present somebody with the right to an abortion if this is God's gift? And my friend said, no, that's what you believe.
Yeah.
You need to keep that separate from my right. And that's what my friend, and finally my one friend who is Christian said, "You're breaking my heart. I can't, I can't take this anymore." And my poor other friend is like, "Oh, I'm not trying to break your heart. I just
And that's what it ends up turning into, is this emotional thing.
Yeah,
when
I
it's
just
like,
want freedom.
All I wanted was evidence. Give me a reasoned argument. You'll convince me. That's all it's going to take. But they refuse to do that because they don't have it. It's
exactly.
This is what God says. Well, how do you know that's what God says? Because it's in the Bible. Well, so what? Well, the Bible is the Word of God. Well, how do you know it's the Word of God? Because it says it is. Well, of course it says it is. Like, what? You don't see the...
This is all circular reasoning. We're all going around in a circle. And
if you say that, they say, "Oh, you're breaking my heart." No, I'm breaking your argument. That's what happened here. You just lost. That's what happened.
Exactly.
Like, it's so frustrating.
I do get the opportunity to talk to a lot of people who present their beliefs to me, and it's just, one woman was so emphatic talking about Jesus, like, well, yeah, I don't see any evidence for Jesus, so.
Oh, that guy again.
You don't believe in Jesus? Oh my gosh! Now we've just hit an emotional chord, and we're, this is just shocking news. I'm like, well, there's just no evidence. You tell me.
That drives them bonkers. Oh man.
Yeah. And by the way, there was no eyewitnesses either. There was no eyewitnesses to Jesus even being there. I mean,
well. And what sense does the whole story make anyway? So God made people that He knew would disobey Him. Unless He's not omniscient, like unless He's not God, He knew what they were going to do. He knew what they were going to do. So then they do what He knew they were going to do, which means He built them and created them specifically to disobey Him. That was His purpose for creating them.
He built them to fail.
Yeah. And then punishes them for doing exactly what He knew they would do, and then to forgive all of humanity for what those things did that He wanted them to do, which you can't forgive them for doing something you wanted them to do anyway, but okay. To forgive all of humanity, He makes another person and kills them.
Well,
because when you need to forgive somebody, that's what you do. You have a child and you kill it.
Well, okay.
Because that's how you forgive people.
Well, you have to remember, too, in some cases, too,
oh, my God.
The child you created is God, so basically, therefore, then what you're saying is God committed suicide.
Yeah.
So either He created a son who He killed, or He committed suicide. So, either way, this is what you need to do to
This is what you need to convince yourself is real.
Yeah.
Like, how could you believe such, like, how is SpongeBob SquarePants any crazier than that? How is that any crazier? Or Transformers, like any Jerry Bruckheimer, anything. How is any of that crazier than believing something as outrageous as, that's just, oh.
What do you say after that, right? Or you know?
Yeah, it's just like, all right.
That argument does kind of shut you up after a while. You're just thinking to yourself, well, what do I say?
If you'll believe that, there's nothing I can say.
I mean, you know, it does. But, you know, again, the belief is so strong. It's like, well, you just don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, then it kind of becomes obvious, like, reasoning and stuff isn't why they believe those things. It's not like, you know, that isn't why.
Well, it's faith. It's believing.
Yeah. But it provides
believing in
something.
something when you don't have evidence for it.
It gives them hope. But why would you do that? Like, there has to be a motivation for us to do anything.
Well,
so
and I think you hit it, hope.
Yeah, it wraps a lot of the unanswerable questions up about reality and, you know, existentialism and all that. It wraps up all the answers for them nice and neatly, whether they're absurd or not. It's at least an answer and gives them purpose, gives them all these other things, and meets that hope for them.
Right, and so now the question is, you know, I wonder if you could say, hey, there is actually purpose beyond believing in something. There is purpose to life. You make your own purpose, you know? I mean...
Because that's a big conversation right there. I would love to... But yeah.
But...
Yeah, a coworker recently, it came out that I don't believe in that stuff. And this coworker was like, well, what do you... I mean, how do you just look at the world and think, you know, like there's no reason for it, you know, that there's nothing did it, you know? Why do you think everything's here? And I was like, I don't know why. And that's all I got, you know, like I don't know why. And who says there is a why? Who says there's a reason? I don't know. All I can do is my best to figure out as much as I can figure out. What I can't, I just admit that I can't and hope that I can eventually. And then as far as I mean, it's up to us to try and make a purpose for ourselves. And really, that's all anybody's doing anyway. Whether a secular non-believer is inventing some purpose that's secular, that's no different than a believer creating the purpose of, oh, well, there's a God, and it wrote this thing, and it wants me to do, you know, this list of items that I have to do, and that's my purpose. That's them creating a purpose. No different than me creating a purpose. You know, we're all just trying to create a purpose, a reason to keep going.
Well, and speaking of purpose, one of our purposes when we first started was to address some issues of women in religion, and hopefully we address some of those issues and you know, some of the things that surround it, and of course we went into things with gender roles and you know, trying to take religion out of it. What would gender roles be like? What would society be like? What would we be doing? Would things still be equal? You know, I guess.
think things would be more equal.
I would hope. You know, I mean, you know, again, as we see, as the world, hopefully the world is still, here in America, I think we'll get there. We will get there. I mean, we have the framework for it, and if we keep pushing down all these personhood bills and abortion things and this like that, we have the ability to equalize things, and I really think that that'll change a lot of things and open up a lot of doors for a lot of men and women. You know, I mean, not just women. It's going to open up doors for men too when everything becomes equal. Yeah. So I didn't want men to think that women in religion is totally leaving them out, and you know, now you're not even a part of the discussion, you're a big part of the discussion, you know, because we need things to be equal. And part of that is having you to say, okay, yeah, you know, I'm a feminist too, which a feminist is basically someone who believes in gender equality, both socially, politically, you know, so it's okay for a guy to say, yeah, I am a feminist. It's not a feminine word. It's just a saying that you believe in equality of gender.
But now there's a lot of disagreement over what the word feminism means. There's different...
Well, there's definitely different terms. I mean, and that, you know, that is a whole big topic, too. many different, I mean, within one grouping, you're going to find many other things. But in general, it's about equality, in general.
Yeah,
Now-
yeah. There almost shouldn't need to be a word feminism.
Right.
Like there isn't a counterpart. There isn't a masculine counterpart. There isn't. What would we say? What would we don't even have another word. We don't
No,
have
we
a-
don't, we
an
don't, we
opposite.
don't, we don't. But, I mean, and I see your point there. I mean, as you talk about issues and try to bring equality into it, yeah, people are going to say, well, no, things like this don't make things equal. They make you think that women are men. You know what I mean? Like a lot of movies out there, when we see
Yeah.
movies, some portray women as being a certain way, some portray men as being a certain way. So we're going to argue about that. We're going to argue, well, we shouldn't do movies like this because this isn't equal, or, so there's going to be a lot of fighting over that and things
Yeah.
like that. And of course, that's not really going to help the issue. Really, it's going to really start coming down to family and gender roles within
Yeah.
that family, I think.
There's a lot. I mean, that's a huge, complicated thing, and what makes it so much more complicated is that there isn't a lot of common discussion about it. Like there might be among academics and sociologists and stuff, but just the average person doesn't talk about these things enough that we've all talked about it or anything. We don't have a common.
We haven't shared
home base.
ideas. We
Yeah.
haven't shared anything that would lead us to. We're just still living our roles is what we're doing, or what everybody else is doing. Or
Yeah.
they're still just
Trying
living,
to figure it out.
and trying to figure it out on their own, how they're going to reconcile with whatever they're trying to do. So
I do think there is like a certain need though for some of the stuff. Like I don't know how to even. Me and my wife had a good conversation about this stuff, and now I can't remember any of it. This was like months ago. I don't know.
But I know my husband and I have so many good conversations about
Yeah.
this stuff, and he brings up a lot of wonderful ideas, and I present ideas, and we challenge each other with ideas, and then all of a sudden you go to think about it, and it's like, wait a minute, there was a good point in there, and I
Yeah.
can't remember what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I was just trying to wrap some of the stuff up that we were talking
Yeah.
about, and if anybody out there has any comments or wants to see a show on something, or talk about something, or something like that,
You can call in or
call in. Yeah, let us know.
You could like us on Facebook on the PA Nonbelievers. On Facebook, it's Pennsylvania Nonbelievers. On Facebook, you can give us a request on there. That would be
Right, and I
nice.
think that came up on the screen too at
Oh,
one
yeah,
point or
here we go.
another. Wait, there you go. There it is. So
Magic.
again.
That is Hollywood. That is movie magic right there.
So again, go there and let us know what you want to see, what you want to hear about, what are your thoughts on any given topic. It doesn't have to be women in religion. It doesn't have to be about it. What are your thoughts? What do you want to see? I mean, that's ultimately why we're up here trying to talk to you.
Yeah. All right. I guess we should mention. Okay, this week, PA Nonbelievers has the street festival. We'll have a booth at the Old York Street Fair. That's on Sunday, and it's always a lot of fun anyway. Even if you don't come to see us, it's just good to get out. But stop by and buy some of our wonderful items for sale, like bumper stickers. Yeah, on the corner of Beaver and Market, right downtown, a block away from the square. And what else do we have going on? I think Lancaster. When's Lancaster Pride Fest?
Next month.
Oh, that's next month. We'll have more details on that in the next show, I guess.
That's pretty much what we have going on right now.
There's more, but I don't memorize it all. So you have to go to the panonbelievers.org
Morning
there.
meeting on Thursday, this Thursday.
Yeah, Lemoyne meeting on this Thursday in Lemoyne. The details are at the website. Is there another one this week? Okay. Well, I'm just gonna probably ramble until the cuts me off here, because we don't really have we used to have a clock that counted down, but we don't have it right now while the studio's in transition.
Well, I mean, the best thing is, we're all here in York. Come down to the street fair and walk around, enjoy everything.
Bye.
Bye.